Hello, my name is Matthew Betzen. I'm going to be taking you through a presentation on the science of reading, so buckle in. So what is the science of reading and why is it important? Well, it's an interdisciplinary body of research that looks at the question, how does the brain learn how to read, and does it pick up language or reading in the same way that it picks up language? And hundreds of thousands of articles from many different fields or disciplines have identified that no, in fact, it doesn't. We need explicit and direct instruction for our brains to pick up how to read. And so that at those findings from all that research, all that science that was conducted, advocates for code-based literacy instruction models or strategies, and that's what we will be looking at today. So we know that we need a code-based literacy instruction. Well, what are the major elements of that? Well, the NRP in 2000 compiled over 100,000 studies and analyzed them to identify these 5 elements of reading instruction, which basically these are the 5 main predictors of successful readers. They are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We're going to take a look at what each of these means, and then 3 instructional practices or strategies for each that we can teach to students. So phonemic awareness is the ability to hear, identify, and manipulate individual sounds or phonemes in spoken words and syllables. The idea is that we're meeting children at their level. They know how to say and speak words. So we're coming at them with a top-down approach where we're using their phonological awareness and then breaking that down until they have a phonemic awareness. So starting with things like spoken words, syllables, onsets, and rhymes, and then working our way down to the level of phonemes. One phoneme at a time to make it fun for students. We might use spoonerisms to mess around with the initial sounds of words just to make it fun, to encourage them to play with language and identify that you can break down language into those initial sounds, those middle sounds, those end sounds, the individual phonemes, right? McGee and Ukrainians identified the 3 levels of scaffolding: intense, moderate, and minimal, where intense were helping students sound out each of the phonemes in a word. Moderate would be just asking them to give us the first phoneme of a word, of a CVC word. Or minimal would be where we're letting the children find the initial and the end word or phoneme of a CVC word, while we might give them the middle one. So with phonics, we're teaching that the phonemes that we just broke down are being matched to written symbols in a systematic and predictable way so that they could learn these codes and to help them code in the future, or decode and code in the future. Instructional practices or strategies to help teach this would be the alphabetic principle. Students need to be able to identify, name, and then match the letters that they identified and named with their phonemes, the sounds that they make. You want to start with consonants and work your way to short vowels, because consonants make the most consistent phonemes. And then short vowels are the easiest for students to name. Then you work to schwa and then lon vowel sounds, things like that. Sequential and hierarchical blending and sequential and hierarchical segmenting are 2 additional instructional practices or strategies. Sequential blending would be when you are giving students a word that's written down, like sit, and help them identify that the S makes the sound, the I makes the I sound, the T makes the T sound, and then you might blend those together. S, it, sit. Hierarchical blending would be the same thing, but with multisyllabic words, where you're breaking them into syllables and then phonemes, and then reconstructing them with those letters that you've matched with those phonemes to the syllables, and then the whole word again. Sequential and hierarchical segmenting is the same thing, but now you're working in the opposite direction. You're giving the students a word and asking them to segment that, and then write it down. So you're vocalizing the word, they're segmenting it, like sit, s, it, then they match s, it with S, I, and T. And fluency is reading accurately at an appropriate rate with appropriate expression or prosody and with correct text phrasing. What that means is reading accurately, you're able to retrieve the words quickly and produce them as you read them. You're able to decode quickly at an appropriate rate. You're not reading too fast or too slow. With appropriate expression or prosody, you're intonating your voice properly and you're stressing syllables properly to sound natural. And with correct text phrasing, it means you're scooping or chunking the sentence according to its phrases in a natural way. You're not just reading straight through, as example, when there's commas separating independent clauses or such. Instructional practices and strategies to teach fluency include direct instruction, which is when you would model the fluency to your students by reading an example sentence, such as, "The dog went to the park, but he did not stay for long." and then you might reread that sentence, but disfluently. The dog went to the park, but he did not stay for long. And then you would ask your students, okay, what made that disfluent? And you would work on building up that vocabulary of fluency, the vocabulary of words like prosody and intonation, scooping or chunking, to help students become active in their learning, to be conscious of those words and be conscious of what fluency is. And you don't want to separate, or you don't want to spend too much time on direct instruction, though. Only about 30% of the time, research shows 70% of the time should be dedicated to the other instructional practices or strategies for fluency, such as repeated oral reading, which you want to do about 3 times. Research shows is the best. And then once students get to be fairly fluent, then you can move them onto silent wide reading, where they read silently over a wide variety of text types and genres, such as expository texts and narrative texts in different genres like sci-fi, Western, things like that. But with you checking in on a regular basis with them, though, to ask comprehension questions and things of that nature. Another way to instruct students in fluency is by doing choral reading of text, such as in unison, where you all read together; echo, where you read something and then they have to echo it back to you; antiphonal is when you might have the boys say one sentence and then the girls say the next sentence. And then reading in rounds is like reading in unison, but you're staggering that, so you have small groups reading starting at this time, they read in unison, and then another group will start like 2 seconds later and read in unison, and then the next group will start 2 seconds after that and they'll read in unison. And those are the strategies that you would want to use to teach fluency. Vocabulary, it's the glue that holds together stories and ideas. There's levels of it: listening, speaking, reading, and writing vocabulary. Listening is your widest vocabulary, or your broadest one. And then the instructional practices to teach vocabulary, though, it's the use of models. You can use word maps and Freyer models to teach words or to assess the knowledge of words, potentially. Structural analysis is breaking down words into their phonemes, or their smallest, not their phonemes, their morphemes, which are the smallest units of meaning in words. And then the morpheme, from that morpheme knowledge, you can decode, in a way, decode other words that use those morphemes in them. So if you know what the prefix dis means, it means like not, then you can apply that prefix dis to other words like disfluent. Okay, disfluent means not fluent. Now you use structural analysis to help you broaden your vocabulary by looking at those morphemes. Context clues would be like looking at a text, looking at the words around a word that you're not sure of, and using those words to help you understand the meaning of that word, or any information for that matter. It could be text features, it could be the text structure to help you understand what a word means. That works too. So comprehension is what we've been working for this whole time. Meaning is constructed during interactions between the text and the reader with intentional thinking. A long way of saying we're reading something, we understand what we're reading, and we're able to retell it. That's the full test of comprehension. Instructional practices to teach this would be teaching students how to analyze text features and structure. If they can analyze and know what a subheading is, that can tell them, okay, that subheading is telling me what this following paragraph or string of paragraphs is going to be about. That really clues me into what the text is trying to say and helps me comprehend it. Text structure, the cause and effects text structure, the order of events text structure helps me know, okay, there is a message that the author is trying to get across, and if I understand that, then I can understand what the author is trying to say. And teaching those things will help students in that endeavor. Question and answer relationships are similar to that. There's in the book question and answer relationships, and there's in my head question and answer relationships, which can be further broken down into subcategories. But really what these are trying to do is help students understand that the relationship between the question and answer will help them read through text in a different way, where they're looking for answers that questions might be posed for. And when they look at text like that, then they're better able to understand it. All right, the 5-block reading, writing essentials model. This provides a framework for organizing daily reading and writing instructions and primary grades. Okay, so it's a model to help teachers know how to teach literacy, and it focuses on those big 5 elements that we taught. Each one of these 5 blocks will help us teach one of those elements, or sometimes more than one. The 5 blocks are word work, writing, fluency, comprehension, differentiated reading instruction. Let's take a look at each of them. All right, the first block of the 5-block approach would be the word work block. This is when we're working on skills like foundational literary skills of phonological and phonemic awareness and phonics. For kindergarten, an example of this with the kindergarten class, we'd be working about those alphabet letters, learning the names of those letters, and applying and matching those names with the phonemes that those letters make. Then we're working on sight words, the most common sight words, and how to spell them. We're working with decoding CBC words like cat, dog, pig, etc. And then how this relates to the science of reading we learned earlier is that phonemic awareness and phonics, of course, are essential for reading success. We know that, so this whole block is just dedicated to that only. Writing is our next block. This is like a writer's workshop where we're focusing on helping students develop those writing skills. We're practicing various writing genres, and we're understanding the writing process in general. It's a writer's workshop. For kindergartners, though, how would we do this for kindergartners? Well, we're working on writing those alphabet letters, the sight words that we learned earlier, and short words. We're writing them down. The science of reading, how this relates to that, this reinforces the reading comprehension. If we're able to write down words, we're able to comprehend the meaning of those words first, right? And vice versa. And that's how it's related to that. Fluency is our next block, and it's explicit fluency instruction. Oral repeated reading activities would be great for this. And then for the kindergarten example, we might be reading letters or picking out letters or capital letters from a string of lowercase letters or vice versa. And then once we get past that, maybe we're fluently reading these sight words that we know, or monosyllabic words, CVC words, simple ones like that. And we're building on the science of reading we're building up that phonemic awareness and understanding of phonics, and then we're improving our comprehension by doing this as well. So comprehension, this is another 30-minute block. All the other ones before this are also 30 minutes, and this is an explicit comprehension instruction where we're looking at explicit comprehension strategies in the older grades. But for our kindergarten example, we might just be listening to stories like a read aloud and then asking comprehension questions as we go along. So if I was to teach this to a kindergarten class, I might read a large read aloud with large print. We might be working on looking at text features and things like that as we go along. And then I'd be asking comprehension questions to my students like, what just happened, or how is this character feeling after this happens, or maybe even using our comprehension to make predictions like, okay, if this happened, then what's going to happen after that? And then the science of reading, this relates to all of that. If comprehension is the culmination of all those other elements that we learned about in the science of reading, then when we work on our comprehension skills, we're inadvertently working on all those other skills as well. Which is very massively beneficial to our students. And now we're at the 5th and final block, the small group reading instructional time, kind of like tier time, sometimes it's called, where you have a small group station with groups rotating in and out, and you might have specific curriculum designed for each of the skill set of those groups that you've selected. Maybe you have a tier 2 group that comes in, followed by a tier 1 group, etc. And while everyone else is not in that tier 1 or 2 group, they're working on some sort of self-paced work that they can handle that would be beneficial to them while they're not in that group time and everyone else is. Or maybe they just rotated out of the group and they go back to that self-paced work. Could be self-paced work, or could be something that they work on with a partner. For my kindergarten example, maybe I'm working with some tier 2 students on mastering the alphabetic principle. They quite haven't gotten that. They're struggling with matching the letter names with the letter sounds, or the sounds that those letters make. And then everyone else maybe on their iPads, they're working on a digital form of literacy instruction like Lexia Power or Lexia Core 5, or maybe they're listening to audio tapes, stories being read to them, and then after that they'll talk with a partner that they have, like a shoulder partner, and tell them the story that was read to them, and then the partner will tell them their story. That would be some example of maybe what I would use. The science of reading, how this relates, well, we're working on all the skills here. All the skills are being worked on. So thank you for joining me on this presentation about the science of reading, why it's important, what it is, the 5 essential models, how to teach those models with 3 instructional practices, and then the 5 block reading, writing, instructional model.